Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you are. I think where I am, there's a little echo in the back, so my apologies for that from the beginning. But that's what happens with a live show. We're going to have an expert on in a moment that talks about what happens when they pull theirs together, which mostly are so well done, so well produced. And we are so glad to have you with us today. Welcome to the Chicken Box. Welcome to the Chicken Box, powered by the 130-year-old Afro-American newspapers, the Black Media Authority. We didn't just take that name; that was conferred upon us by Nielsen ratings, and so we hold on to that. And so we're glad that you're here this afternoon, wherever you're tuning in from. I'm Frances Tony Draper, one of the co-hosts on this intergenerational, multi-generational show, holding it down for the boomers. Our co-host Impeccable is not with us today, but he's usually holding it down for the Gen Xers. But our other co-host is here. Introduce yourself, Courtney Alexander. Let the viewers know who you are and who you represent.
Hi, my name is Courtney Alexander. I am your other co host, and I am representing Gen Z.
All righty, and tell us what you do at the Afro.
I am the digital marketing editor. So I pretty much post on social media, and when you see those responses coming through, that's me. So thank you for joining us.
All righty, so we're glad to have everyone here today. We have such, and Courtney, I'm going to ask you in just a few moments to introduce our special guest. We're going to bring him on camera. He's really no stranger to the Afro, and so we're so glad to have him joining us today. And so, Facebook, or I should say, Meta Family, join me in welcoming Travis Mitchell. Travis, hi, Travis, glad to have you. Let me say, Travis, I know this is your first time on Chicken Box. And yes, we spell it with two X's. And so some of our viewers, this may be their first time as well. And our tagline is "Don't be a chicken, get on the box." And so it's a place where you speak your truth about whatever topic we have to be talking about today. And so we're going to encourage folks, put your comments in the chat. Y'all know how this works. Invite somebody, like us. Come on, let's have a dialogue. All right, Courtney, you want to introduce Travis, please?
Yeah. Hi, Travis. Thank you so much for joining us today. So Travis is the MPT Senior Vice President and Chief Content Officer. Um, he also, one second. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you great.
Okay. Yes. He is with Maryland Public Television. And today he will be talking to us about HBCU Week.
All right, it is HBCU week across the country. And I'm hoping that everybody knows that what HBCU is. I mean, I have on my HBCU T-shirt of historically Black colleges and universities. Travis, your background is so impressive, and I know it's hard to introduce yourself, but tell us a little bit about it. I mean, I know you're going to brag on alma mater. Both Travis and I, and our co-host is not here, Impeccable, are graduates of Morgan State, the Morgan State
That's
University.
right. The Morgan State.
But Travis, if you would tell us a little bit about your journey. I mean, you're in such a critical role there at Maryland Public Television. So kudos to you. Tell us a little bit about your journey, and then we're going to come back and find out a little bit more about what you do at MPT before we jump into this HBCU week discussion.
Well, thank you, Dr. Draper. And I'm really a big fan of what you have done and what the Afro is doing in this space. Is so critically important to have these forums as, local news is taking a hit, particularly community news. It's very important for our community to preserve its independent voice. And so I salute you and I stand ready to assist you in your mission with the Afro. That being said, I feel right at home. I think I went to the doctor the other day and I had to have like a little incision. And when they cut me, I bled orange and blue. So that's what people need to know about me, a graduate of the Morgan State University. And I start there because now I'm going to go back to the beginning of my journey, what got me to Morgan and how arriving at Morgan changed my life. I grew up in Raleigh, North Carolina, go all the way back there. My parents, my family, my uncle They all were graduates of Shaw University in Raleigh. I grew up on that campus. My house was only a stone's throw from the campus when I was a child. When we moved a little further away, we were still only 5 minutes. My father was a basketball coach there. My uncle was on the board of trustees. My uncle in Raleigh, North Carolina, the late Senator Vernon Malone, was the chair of the school board when the county and the public schools merged, and he became the chairman of the first integrated school board or school system in North Carolina. And Wake County in North Carolina set forth a model for the nation during a very divided time, and both in the South and in the North, around school busing to achieve integration. And he was a Shaw man. And so HBCUs, I share with people now, was my Wakanda before I knew what Wakanda was. It was a place where you were affirmed. It was a place where I understood the expectation of excellence. Shaw University is the oldest HBCU in the South. And so I grew up in Raleigh. My father was a basketball coach. My mother was a principal of a high school there. And of course, when I graduated, I played basketball for 4 years, following my father's footsteps. I'd like to say I was an outstanding player there. My mother made sure that she put books in my hands, and my father put a basketball in my hands. And so when I graduated, it was important for me to go to a school where I could be both a student and an athlete, or a scholar and an athlete. And so I received a bunch of different offers and decided to take my talents to Bear Nation, not Shaw Bear Nation, but Morgan State University Bear Nation, where the late Nat Fraser recruited me to Morgan. And once I got to Morgan, I had a full honor scholarship, and I had a basketball scholarship. I played on the basketball team using the honor scholarship as my basis of tuition payment. But things didn't turn out the way I thought they would at Morgan from a basketball perspective. And I think this is where HBCUs are so vitally important, because they provide a culture of leadership development. My professors simply encouraged me to channel all of my leadership ability on the court and translate it off the court. And I became the assistant editor of The Spokesman, Dr. Draper. And one of the things that people don't know is that when I took the opportunity to join The Spokesman, I didn't realize it had not published in 8 years.
Well,
So
tell people what you and I know what The Spokesman is, but maybe our viewers are not quite sure what The Spokesman is.
So for the viewers, The Spokesman is Morgan State University student newspaper. And so it had not published for 8 years, but I didn't know that when I signed up, right? So I took one news writing class, and this is where my connection with Afro began, because I visited with Afro leadership as a student, and I said, well, how do you publish a newspaper? So we learned a lot about how to raise money through advertising. And I'm proud to say that we raised all the money to bring The Spokesman back, and we ran it like a business. And so that was my first foray into media. I learned what it was like to start a newspaper to serve your community. And that began my media journey. But it was also during this time that there was a student uprising at Morgan. And it was around campus conditions, and students just really wanted to understand why there was such a disparity between our facilities at Morgan and the universities around us, such as at Towson, et cetera. And so I was drafted to temporarily take my spokesman hat off, and then to put on the hat of the spokesperson for this student movement. This is right around 1990. And I got to tell you, it truly changed my life forever. We decided, once we had a one-day meeting with Dr. Richardson, who is what I consider one of the nation's greatest presidents ever. This man was so shrewd in how he led Morgan, and what he did with us as students changed the trajectory of our lives. But we needed answers, and Dr. Richardson provided us with answers. We began to understand that this issue was much larger than our administration. It was rooted in systemic racism for 40 years. We had determined that Morgan had been systemically underfunded, Even under separate but equal laws, Morgan's formula was violated. And so Morgan did not receive the type of investment it needed for capital improvements on the campus. And so we began our student protest, and we began to focus it on the state of Maryland, who had a very popular former mayor of Baltimore at that time, who happened to be the mayor, the governor of Maryland, William Donald Schaefer. And we negotiated hard with him. And so after we had done a student sit-in, we decided to extend it past 24 hours. We did teach-ins in the campus buildings and those who couldn't join us in administration. And it was a peaceful demonstration of how to bring forth your grievances, but do it in a peaceful way. And we did not attack our administration or our beloved Morgan brand. We did address what we were considering the things that the state of Maryland needed to do to immediately address our situation. So long story short, our protest was 7 days. During this time, we laid out our case before the public. The university had already put in place a 25-year plan for its development. And the funding of that plan was being stalled in Annapolis. And the governor had the power to expedite that plan. Wow. And so we simply asked the governor if he would shut down several of our dormitories, which meant that you had to fulfill your obligation to students for housing. And once we did that, it set dominoes in place. Now, in the middle of the negotiation, if you remember Dr. Draper at that time, Schaefer's public position was that Morgan would be better off, and he would do it if Morgan would disband its Board of Regents and fold in under the University of Maryland system. And he also was pushing for a merger between Morgan and Coppin. And Morganite said no, and Coppinite said no. And we continued to drive for Morgan maintaining its independence. But we thought, Dr. Draper, that was a distraction. And so we kept focused on what the critical issues were of the day. And so Dr. Richardson and the leadership had already laid before the governor a plan, and we needed the governor to co-sign this. So we had working in our favor prominent Morganites, such as Senator Clarence Blount. We had at that particular time Howard Pete Rawlins. We had Congressman Kwesi Mfume. There was a group of folks that were in support of the students.
Yep, whole group of folk. Hold that point there. I'm gonna let you finish. Hold that point, because some people are just tuning. If you're just tuning in and wondering what are we talking about, this is the Chicken BOXX powered by the Afro-American newspapers. Our guest today is not only Vice President of Content Creation, I hope I don't miss, Vice President and Chief Content Officer for Maryland Public Television. You all already have heard he's an athlete, a scholar, an advocate, a quasi-politician, was a student leader and is a leader in his own right now. This is a Chicken BOXX where we say, don't be a chicken, get on the box. So if you're just tuning in, I want to say good afternoon to you. I see Delois is tuned in and Jewel is tuned in. Come on, you all let us know that you are there so we can give you a shout out. If you have a comment or a question, we're talking to our guest. He's given us all of his fantastic background about how he got to where he is. We want to focus and shift the conversation. I'm gonna let you finish the sentence. To this HBCU week that some of us may not know about, and I'm hoping many do because they're Afro leaders or Maryland Public Television followers, because the week is just getting started. I mean, we're midweek, I guess, we're 4 days into it. And so go ahead, Travis, tell us what you wanted to finish.
Well, I wanted to bring that forward because this is where the idea of HBCU week came from. So at the end of our protest, or in the middle of it, the governor reneged on his promise to us to expedite the building for Morgan. So I took 4 of the students with me, and we walked 40 miles to Annapolis, and we had a press conference, and Afro was there. And we said, Mr. Governor, you have trashed your word, so we're going to return your trash to you. We were wearing trash bags, and we walked to Annapolis. The long and short of this is that the governor followed through on his words with the Board of Public Works later that summer. And it began what ended up being 1.5 billion in capital improvements for Morgan State University. Many of those buildings that we see previous to the Calvin and Tina Tyler building were part of Dr. Richardson's 25-year plan. Morgan changed my life. You have a 19-year-old ex-basketball player whose GPA ended up being higher in points per game or assists per game. When I lost my identity as a basketball player, I found my voice and my calling as a student leader off the court. Only a Morgan State University could do that. Only a Shaw University could do that. So I say wherever I am today is because of an HBCU. No Shaw, no Morgan, no me. And because I have experienced the HBCU experience, I thought it was important that we provide a week-long series of content programmed exclusively about HBCUs that talk about HBCUs history and also their contemporary relevance. And so this is the third iteration of HBCU on MPT. We have 22 hours of content. If people missed content on Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, they can find much of it on demand on our website. We have several more days coming up, including on Saturday. We have the Morgan Towson Clash, the Battle of Greater Baltimore on MPT. And during halftime, we're talking to the presidents. And we're hoping that people can see these are two great regional institutions. But of course, I'm biased. I'm rooting for the orange and blue. And so everywhere from arts and sports and music, last night was a powerful 3 hours of programming. Featured Howard University's jazz ensemble Afro Blue, a documentary about a year in the life. We had the Fisk Jubilee Singers 150th year anniversary special. And then we ended things with a 2-hour Morgan Choir, a joyful celebration, which is the highest rated program for 25 years going on Maryland Public Television. So it was a celebration of Black excellence during HBCU Week, and certainly punctuated last night.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. Hello, Craig, another Morgan alum. I see that you've tuned in. Glad that you're here. And so your history is so fascinating, Travis. Thank you for sharing that. And we're glad that you're where you are, because you instituted this HBCU celebration that MPT does, right? 22 hours of content. We're going to jump into that. We have your Morgan protest. We have a video on that. I'm trying to find out. So here you are. Here it is. We'll do a little bit of it. Lisa, I don't know how long it is. Lisa's our producer. Okay, Lisa, let's see. We can see Travis in action. Travis, you have to show us where you are if you can see yourself in this.
Well, see, I don't see it. When she hits play, you'll see me. But if the video plays, you'll just look at the student with the high top fade with about 3 or 4 parts.
Okay.
You'll see me.
All right, Lisa, so you'll play a little bit of it, Lisa? I don't know if she can. I see it there. Looks like it's ready to play. All right, Lisa, you can take it down, work on it backstage, and let me know if you get it back up.
And there may be 2, Lisa. I think the second video has me at a dais with former Higher Education Secretary Shayla Airy. That's where I come in right at the beginning. It's the second video down.
Second video. All right, we'll try to get that up for our viewers. We can take that down right now, Lisa. We'll come back to that. Thank you so much. Courtney, you look like you are just itching to jump in and ask Travis a question.
Yes, I do have a question for you, Travis. So on social media, I see HBCU students currently facing housing adversities. What advice would you give to them on how to organize these protests, and how can they take action?
Well, I think the first thing they have to do, and you remember, we worked in collaboration with our administration. And so I'm speaking strictly as an HBCU advocate. There are 2 strategies that always have to happen. Number 1 is you have to work as much as you possibly can in support of your administration. Get to the root cause of any of the issues that you may face. And keep in mind, there are 2 audiences. There's the in-house conversation that we must have between students and administrators and board at an HBCU. And then there is an external conversation. And what we tried to do during our student protests is whenever we spoke to external media, we were always on one accord with our administration. And that's important because absent the Afro, you don't find media outlets that will unpack the whole story. They will take the negative and they will harp on the negative storylines for HBCUs. And so you can never then get to the positive contributions that HBCUs make. Let's be clear. HBCUs are not the only ones facing housing problems, right? There's a shortage of housing on pretty much every university campus, but HBCUs are the ones that get stained with the negative images that are often reported when these things come up. So while I am for always advocating student rights and student positions, how could I not do anything but that, given the fact that I was a student leader? I will always say that it's important for student leaders to meet with their administrators and negotiate privately behind closed doors before something comes out publicly.
And I'll say amen to that. As a member of Morgan's Board of Regents for 25 years, and Travis serves on Shaw University's Board of Trustees. It is always better to negotiate it behind closed doors. In fact, you get more that way, because once it becomes public, then it becomes so adversarial, and so many other people jump in the fray that really don't have a dog in the fight. They just
No.
they just want to keep the the tension going, and you don't resolve it that way. That was a great question, Courtney. Travis, I can't believe that people have not yet seen some of this programming, but there's a possibility. So tell us, you told us a little bit about last night with Afro Blue, as well as the Fifth Jubilee Singers. Talk a little bit about the documentary. You premiered this documentary with your former dean at the School of Communications and Journalism, produced for not for, but about about Mr. Tyler and his contributions to Morgan. He made the largest single contribution of anybody, any African American, to an HBCU when he invested $20 million at Morgan. So talk to us a little bit about, tell us a little bit, if you can, about the inside. How do you get this programming? How do you get this done? You premiered this, which means that really sets you apart. So tell us a little bit about what happens behind the scenes.
So Dr. Draper, Monday night was important. We debuted the Calvin Tyler story, and it's to your point, it's a Baltimore native, a great story for us, Baltimore native, who happened to be a Morgan student and couldn't finish because he had a family. He couldn't afford to stay in school. And so he dropped out and became a driver at UPS and worked his way up at UPS from a driver to become the largest individual shareholder, member of the board. He had almost 3 times as many shares, or at least double the amount of shares, as the chairman and CEO. And over that span of service at UPS, he becomes executive vice president, I believe, and is on the board. And he's the Jackie Robinson of corporate America. And he then gives all of the credit to Morgan. And he begins giving back to Morgan in bits and pieces. And in total, he had first given $1 million, I think, and then $5 million. Dr. Draper, are you on the board? And then he culminates it with an additional 20, I believe. And so it's $25 million, if I'm not mistaken, of investment over that time in Morgan State, and establishes the Calvin and Tina Tyler Scholars. And that's just an example of the type of stories that are within the DNA of Morgan, and of other HBCUs. So Dr. Draper, the way this began, Dean Wickham, the founding dean of Morgan's Global School of Journalism, began talking to me about this idea over a year ago. And Morgan established the Center for New Media that could begin to stand up stories like this and produce them. And through support and generosity of different funders that Morgan was able to raise enough money to go into production. We then at Maryland Public Television provided in-kind services, some editing, some technical support to support what was already done. And then we signed a deal where we had the ability to air it exclusively on MPT. And I might add, we're working with Morgan to see if we can get that show syndicated on PBS. I happen to be the co-executive producer of a program that also has been airing on MPT. It's the story of Shaw University, Shaw Rising. And we were able to get Shaw syndicated on PBS affiliates around the country. And since last September, it has aired in 24 of the top 25 PBS television markets around the country. It's been aired over 1,000 times and in over 86% of the country. So there, if we can take a Calvin Tyler story, if we take a Shaw Rising, if we can take Afro Blue, if we can take all this content that you're seeing on MPT, our long-term vision is to not have it stop here. We want it to be seen nationally and aired by PBS affiliates across the country. And then we want to partner PBS affiliates like we're partnering with Morgan. We want our partners around the country to partner with their local HBCUs, because one week and one station, there's no way that we can tell the stories of HBCUs. I'll end with this note, Dr. Draper. PBS, in its post-George Floyd entity, I am challenging PBS to think strategically about partnerships with HBCUs, because beyond the moment, if we're going to super serve our community with public media, HBCUs should be at the forefront of that storytelling, because the public airways belong to the people. We got to make sure that HBCUs in every market have access to their public media partner, similar as we are giving Morgan and the HBCUs in this area access to MPT.
That's great. I'm so glad you said that. And so for our viewers and for our watchers, I see Byron D says, go Tuskegee. So we have to admit our bias, as Travis and I, we certainly have a bias, but we recognize that there are many, many, many HBCUs of excellence throughout the country, and Morgan State is not the only one in Maryland. And so Bowie has a major, major role in HBCU Week, hosting part of your pre-programming that you've done. And, we'll do a shameless plug. Somebody ought to do some more programming around the Black press too, and the contribution to,
absolutely.
To HBCUs, because like you said, if it wasn't for the Black press, some of the good work that the HBCUs have done, and if it's not for what you're doing, it wouldn't be known. It wouldn't be known. Courtney, jump in. This is a conversation. If you're just tuning in, this is the Chicken BOXX, powered by the Afro-American newspapers. Let me give a commercial. We're not like MPT. You all are pretty much commercial free. Let me give a commercial. The Afro also does a cooking show every Thursday at 7 p.m. on this same outlet. And so tonight, Aria Brent, who is a student at Jackson State, and she is our chef extraordinaire. We also have a cookbook. She says they're making spinach and artichoke stuffed salmon, roasted asparagus, and sweet potato souffle. Now, this is a college student making that, Travis, and she's gonna show us how to make it, and it's going to be delicious. And I don't know if that's a recipe that's in our new cookbook that we just published, and it's out for distribution. Lisa will find a way to put that up so people know how to get that. And so that's our commercial for right now. Courtney, you started down one road. You have another question for Travis?
Yes. So Travis, what topics will primarily be covered during HBCU Week?
So it's great. So we want to cover HBCU contributions. I think there's some critical things. First, we always want to deal with history, right? Because there's so many current HBCU students and graduates that don't know how HBCU started. So a lot of it is rooted in history. We think that's important. But we also want to make sure that beyond culture, like our bands and our music, we really want to make sure, particularly that the HBCUs in this area, people are able to see their innovative programs. So the presidents always get a chance to do a State of the Union of their university. So as a lead up to HBCU, we interviewed each president of the 6 area HBCUs: Bowie State University, University of Maryland, Eastern Shore, Coppin State, Morgan State, UDC, and Howard. And they were able to have a platform to talk about their schools, because there's a lot of misinformation about what our HBCUs and the DMV do. And then this Friday, Dr. Kay, Sonia Whitehead, who's the host of Today with Dr. K on WEAA-FM. She is a graduate of Lincoln University. And so we thought she would be a perfect host. We have a show that's about the innovative programs of HBCU. So we're going to talk about, for instance, the history of Black college bands. We have Dr. Reed, the new band director at Morgan, who's going to come on after a short clip, an outstanding clip from a filmmaker from Howard who captured Howard University. We have Dean Rashad addressing the band students there. We have, and talking about the purpose, and then a short film about the Blue and Gold Marching Machine out of North Carolina A&T and leading up to their homecoming. But we couldn't end it there without having the director of the magnificent marching machine coming on and talking a little bit about the history of band programs beyond the style. Here's the substance. And then that's going to be followed up by, again, clips from the presidential interviews. And then here's what we like. We're going to talk to the professors and the students who are in some of these innovative programs. Morgan, for instance, talks about its new PhD program in cybersecurity. How many people know that our HBCUs are engaged in this type of innovative work? We think this is really what's important for people, not only to understand the history, but to understand the contemporary relevance of HBCUs. You know, Dr. Draper, I ran a nonprofit. I've been in media now for almost 30 years. Maybe my gray hair says that. But in between my launching a cable network, the Black Family Channel as the chief operating officer, and where I am now, I spent about a decade running a nonprofit. And we always had to ask the question, what's question zero? And question zero is value proposition. What happened if your nonprofit didn't exist? And what I'm saying to you, people need to understand, not only if you look back historically at the impact of HBCUs, if you pull them out, where would we be? Where would Dr. Draper be? Where would I be? But if you pull them out now, contemporarily, do you realize that HBCUs contribute 25% of the bachelor's degrees in STEM-related fields annually? 25% of the African Americans in STEM fields. If you pull out HBCUs, that would make America globally non-competitive because the labor force would not be ready. So HBCUs not only have a historic past. Hey, listen, SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, was founded at Shaw University by Ella Baker. No SNCC, no Voting Rights Act, no Civil Rights Act, no Obama. So my point is that HBCUs have always made historic contributions, but they continue to make contemporary contributions today. And that's what we want to get across. So art, music, history, and contemporary relevance. That's the point of our shows.
And the other things you said so eloquently earlier, HBCUs are nurturing. Okay, so you didn't put up the stats that you would have liked to have put up or whatever when you were recruited and your tuition was paid for, you know, with your basketball scholarship. But HBCU embraces you and says, wait a minute, Mitchell, there's more to you than basketball. We didn't just bring you here for that. You are a scholar in your own right, right? So you don't get lost at an HBCU. So we're talking about historically Black colleges and universities. We're talking about HBCU week. Maryland Public Television is a leader in this space. In this space, they have had this programming now for 3 years. And
3 seasons. Mm-hmm.
3 seasons. And you've been there 3 seasons? How many seasons have you been?
3 seasons.
3 seasons. And so you came in the door with this concept, as you said, something that's been brewing for a while, of standing on your experience over the years in media and brought this to market, I guess is the right term to say, and looking to take it global. So that Absolutely. Is such a great, tell us something, Travis, if you were to name, we know them, in Maryland, we know those 5, and certainly we know the Howards, the Spelmans, the Morehouses, and North Carolina A&T. What are some of the other HBCUs that people may not be as familiar with? What do you think?
Well, I'll give an example of tonight at 8, we're going to do Conversations for Change. Dr. Draper, the Afro, helped us simulcast this last year. We did it virtually and then we recorded it. This is going to make its television debut tonight. But there's one institution that's going to be mentioned, and that's Benedict in South Carolina. And the president is doing a fantastic job. I mean, we have public HBCUs that we are very familiar with, and then there are private HBCUs that don't have the same level of support. So, I think there's some, the president at Shaw University, Dr. Dillard, we're showing Shaw Rising. There'll be clips out of that film today where she'll be talking a little bit about Shaw University and what it is doing. There are leaders in other HBCUs that do phenomenal things. I'll tell you, in this area, UDC, people need to take another look at UDC, University of the District of Columbia. Out of the 6, it gets the least amount of recognition. But President Mason at UDC has an incredible vision for workforce development, taking those who need to re-enter the workspace and giving them a nurturing environment. And I see the plug for Tuskegee. We actually have a documentary on Friday night about George Washington Carver. And I do think, Dr. Draper, that there needs to be a revisiting of Booker T. Washington. And a lot of times we get caught up in this Du Bois Washington debate. But what Washington was able to do, a lot of people don't realize that he funneled money from the industrialists that were finding their way to Tuskegee because they were enamored by Dr. George Washington Carver. Ford himself tried to get Carver to leave Tuskegee to run R&D for Ford. I mean, that's why they were visiting, because of the academic excellence at Tuskegee. Now, what people don't realize is that Washington was taking the money, raising money for the pipeline of secondary, primary and secondary education, because you needed to build the pipeline for HBCUs. He was fighting lawsuits to make sure, funding lawsuits to make sure that funding was available for Black public schools. And then he was directing funds to his colleagues. One of those colleagues, Dr. Draper, you mentioned other schools, Dr. James Shepard, the founder of North Carolina Central University. Dr. Shepard was a graduate of Shaw University. So out of Shaw University rose 5 HBCUs, including the nation's largest HBCU, North Carolina A&T State University. It was founded on the campus of Shaw University. So when you look at the HBCU story, you have some incredible rock star presidents that are battling against the odds to grow their institutions. If you look at the private side, then we know on the public side, you have an increase in enrollment and investment at the state level. And I think during HBCU week, our effort was to try to show a diversity of both private and public institutions and shine a light on leaders who are doing some incredible work.
That's great, but it's not without a struggle, because we know that the lawsuit for equity and funding for HBCUs here in Maryland was just recently, settled. You talked about Booker T. Washington. If I can find it, I'll share it verbatim. But Booker T. Washington wrote a letter in 1909 to my great-grandfather, John Henry Murphy Sr., the founder of the Afro. And he is pushing for African-American history to be taught in the schools of Baltimore. He said, you've got German history and English history and all kinds of things being taught. And here we are more than 100 years later, still talking about the same thing. And they can call it critical race theory and debate the name, but the fact still remains that if it was not for HBCUs, was not for Booker T. Washington's or John Murphy or others pushing for the information to be in our educational institutions, it would just be an elective course someplace.
That's right.
Elective someplace. So Courtney, did you go to an HBCU?
Unfortunately, I did not. I attended a PWI, but it's one of my biggest regrets. And I'm interested in attending graduate school. So an HBCU is definitely like my top pick.
Well, Courtney, let me say this to you. I want you to be proud of where you went, okay? Because this issue of equity, we need you and we need other Black students to have the freedom of choice, okay? We want you to have the freedom of choice. You ought to be able to pursue an education wherever you go. Now that you've said that, you can talk to Dr. Draper after this call. We'll make sure to get you hooked up so that you can say that you're a proud Morgan Bear. We'll take care of you after the call.
Right. Well, that was right. Be proud of where you went. And because that degree means something. We need it's a both and.
That's right. That's right.
We need investment in HBCUs because, as Travis said, HBCUs produce 25% of the graduates in STEM fields. Morgan produces, it's either number one or number two in producing of Black engineers of everybody in the entire country, right? And so we need our HBCUs built up. It's a both and not an either or.
Mhm.
And Dr. Draper, I would add part of what we're talking about here. Here's what we experienced when I was at Morgan with the student protest. We had Black students from Towson, College Park, and white students, by the way, who joined our struggle because they believed that we were in the right. And so we built coalitions. And see, HBCUs can be the center of coalition building when you're developing a culture of leadership. So you don't have to have gone to an HBCU to support an HBCU. Mm-hmm. Just like growing up in North Carolina, you know, my parents couldn't go to UNC or North Carolina State or some of the blue bloods, Duke. They couldn't go. And so we celebrated our HBCUs, but also when it came to sports, I find it ironic that people were excluded from the academic institutions would pull for the sports team, right? So in a positive way, in the inverse, you can be a student that went to a PWI, but you can pull for your local HBCU. You can have gotten your degree from University of Maryland in College Park, but you can send your money to Morgan State University. So that the reality is you want to make sure to invest in institutions that reinvest in your community.
Correct. And also be a champion for those institutions, because when you look at the leadership void that has systemically been there across the years, and so HBCUs fill that gap and still fill that gap. So there's still a need for HBCUs, but it's a need for Courtney Alexander, Dolores, Chippy, I saw your comment too. There's a need for you to advocate on the campuses where you are, right? Mm-hmm. And it's a need to support HBCUs. But I think about HBCU graduates. I mean, we talked about Booker T. Washington. He was a Hampton graduate.
That's right. You know? That's right. And I just think that we need to reread him, Dr. Draper. I mean, there's a book that I found called The Business Strategy of Booker T. Washington. And if you think about what he was saying and you review it, a couple of things he was saying. He said, listen, to folks in the South during the Great Migration, don't abandon your land. Don't abandon your land, because the greatest way to build up generational wealth is through what? Land. Yep. He said, don't get rid of farming, because if you have the means of production, I think Black farmers now make up less than 1% of farmers. We used to make up upwards of 50% in the South of farmers, if I'm not mistaken. My numbers may be wrong there, but certainly today we're not represented in that field. And so we want to make sure that I think as we revisit Washington, I think you'll see that many of the things he talked about really speak to really the importance of HBCUs, because HBCUs have been local engines that have driven the local economy. Washington was also brilliant. Dr. Draper, I wondered, how does Booker T. Washington, a lot of people reread the Atlanta Compromise and they talk about, they use negative language to talk about Booker T. Washington. There's 2 points I want to make really quickly. One is, if you read the accounts of the Atlanta Compromise, the Ku Klux Klan were standing off stage waiting for him to say something inflammatory so they could lynch him. This is true. The second thing, he spoke in parables. And the message he was trying to send is, let's build up Black economic wealth in our communities. Let's control the means of production. Let's control the service industry. If you get the economic power first, it will parlay itself into political influence. He understood that a long time ago. And in Tuskegee, I wondered, in the Tuskegee's rise, that period of time was some of the most highest number of lynchings over about a 10-year period in and around Alabama and Mississippi. And so I wondered, how was Tuskegee able to get off the ground and not be burned down? Do you realize that Booker T. Washington set it up so that Tuskegee was making bricks that they were selling to local construction companies? They were making mattresses that they were making available to homes. Carver taught farmers, many of them who were in the Klan, how to better utilize their soil. So the question became, if we get rid of Tuskegee, we perish. So HBCUs provide a vital service to the local economies they serve, and we can't forget that.
Absolutely. And they still provide that. They still provide that on today. And so I think that the MPT HBCU Week 22 hours of content are so important to educate all of us. And there is a great, I don't know, I'm gonna make up a word now, remigration to HBCUs. When colleges and universities are complaining about low enrollment, Morgan is as Courtney said, looking for places to house young people and have some 400, I think, or more people, young people in a hotel locally because the demand is so great for HBCU education. Not just because people say I want to go to a black college and university, but because the excellence, the programming. You talked about cybersecurity at Morgan. My granddaughter's a cybersecurity major. Well, she's a graduate now from Clark, Atlanta, and she had no problem getting recruited by Boeing when she was a sophomore or a junior, and now she's working in that field. So it's high demand um, for that field and other STEM fields, as well as things that don't pay as much money, like education.
That's right. And Dr. Draper, I would be remiss if I didn't point something out to you and to your viewers. I want to thank. Here's my shameless plug. I'm not ashamed of it. It's something actually I'm proud of. I want to thank Dr. Minta Bro at Bowie State University. Tonight we're going to do a screening of two Stanley Nelson films, Becoming Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman: Visions of Freedom. Bowie State University became the first HBCU to present a national film on PBS. She stepped up, and Bowie came in as a funding partner for those films. And I think it's critically important to applaud that. Bowie is the oldest HBCU in the state. It was appropriate for Bowie to play this leadership role on these films. These films are going to be seen forever on PBS, and Bowie's message is going to be etched in stone. Wherever these films air, people will see the Bowie State message before the films air. And so I want to thank Dr. Bro. She also, Bowie State, became the premier sponsor of HBCU Week. And why this is important is because Bowie is controlling the narrative. They are taking advantage of the space. They are controlling their own narrative. Let me just say they don't control the MPT narrative, but they're controlling their own narrative. And they're making sure that we are partnering together to tell these really, really important stories. If you're a football fan, on Saturday, we have a day of sports on MPT. Where we're kicking it off. We got the Morgan lacrosse story. Dr. Draper, you're familiar with Morgan's legendary lacrosse team that rose to national prominence in the 70s. We've got two shows about the history of NFL players in the Hall of Fame, NFL Hall of Fame from black colleges. We have a pregame show for the Battle of Greater Baltimore at 6:30 on Saturday, followed by the Morgan Towson game. But at 4 o'clock, I want you to pay special attention to something we're calling the sounds of the game. It is a half-hour, interesting look at the history of HBCU bands through the lens of Howard University and North Carolina A&T. It's going to be a fantastic day on Saturday, and then tomorrow night, we have the tonight we have the Conversations for Change at 8, followed by Foot Soldiers at 9:30. And this is the story of civil rights, a freshman at Spelman College in Atlanta who helped integrate Atlanta and help change the nation. And then on Friday, we have the special at 7, innovative programs at HBCUs, followed by one of our NFL specials. And we cap it off on Friday night with a look at the life and times of George Washington Carver. So we got plenty more coming up for you. One quick programming note: Sunday, we were supposed to do an encore presentation on Sunday, but we just got word that I think the Queen has passed. And so we may be doing, this is breaking news for you, we may be doing special cut-ins from PBS on Sunday, but we'll keep all of our viewers posted as to any scheduling changes.
Wow, it does sound, thank you so much. It does sound amazing, Dolores. It sounds like you should just park yourself in front of your television on tonight all the way through to Sunday and just watch this programming. But I love the fact that you can also go back to the website and catch it if you miss anything. So
and that site is mpt.org/HBCU, mpt.org/HBCU.
there it
And
is.
I would encourage everyone, if they didn't watch the 2-hour Morgan special, the Morgan Choir, I'm not just a homer promoting the Morgan Choir. It is incredible. We talked to the Howard University Choir, Dr. Poole. We talked to the Fisk Jubilee Choir director, Dr. Kwame, and they all pay homage to the late, great Dr. Nathan Carter, including our current Morgan Choir director, Dr. Eric Conway. They all pay homage to a great man who was a musical genius.
Absolutely, a musical genius. Wow, so much great programming. Let me thank everybody for tuning in as we're getting ready to wind up. What we do on a Chicken BOXX, and so Travis, you can start to think about that. We do your final words on the box. That's where you can talk about anything that you want, not yet, but anything that you want on the box. We're going to show that little bit of a clip of you from the protest. I think Lisa's ready to show that, and here it comes. All right. So, yeah, we can see it. We can't hear it, Lisa.
So I've been tired. My soul has been tired for a long time. My physical appearance or my physical being is not a concern here.
Last night, as many as 800 Morgan students occupied the administration building. The president, Earl Richardson, met with students behind closed doors for several hours. Students who have been very vocal in the past 3 days today were mostly silent, saying for now that's the best statement they can make. The protest has also spread to Holmes Hall. Students encouraged other students to boycott classes. It seems to have worked.
I had a class of 37 people and only 3 people showed up. So this is a science class, so that lets you know how serious we're taking this. This is not an administrative student battle, not at all. This is a state student battle.
We're making the administration and the state of Maryland look at us.
They hope the meeting with Governor Shafer will improve conditions.
We can't ask for funding for 5 years from now. We won't be here 5 years from now. We want stuff now. And we're not going to wait any longer. We're going to stay here until somebody addresses these problems.
Roaches. What do you?
That's so Travis. That's what you were talking about, right? That's just a small clip of that. And now you're leading and getting information out in another whole way. So we thank you for being there. I want to thank Travis Mitchell from Maryland Public Television for joining us today. I want to thank Courtney Alexander, my co-host in absentia. I want to thank our other co-hosts, Impeccable. But most of all, I want to thank those of you who hung in with us for this hour. There's our co-host weighing in. Travis, thanking you for the awesome work that you're doing, and we champion you. We look forward to the series on the Black press. There is an integral connection between HBCUs, the Black press, the Black church, and certainly the trajectory for the African American community. So thank you to all who have tuned in on today. If I didn't call your name, that's because you didn't put it in the chat, but we tried to give a shout out to everybody who has tuned in on today. Yes, like, share, and subscribe to MPT. I've done that. You want to be one of their subscribers. Tune in tonight at 7 on this same platform for our cooking show. Then go at 8 to MPT for their programming that starts at 8 on tonight. And as Travis said, they may be preempted on Sunday. We got news this morning that the Queen was very sick, but now she's passed, and so may get preempted for that. All right, I think that is go to afro.com. I forgot to say this. It is our 130th year, Travis. Did you know that?
I did. Congratulations.
Thank you. And we are doing something, we're giving back to community. You all know that it costs more than what I'm getting ready to tell you. For 2 years, you can get the print and digital edition together. You can give away one if you'd like for $130. It's $130. You all know postage is going up. That's not covering postage. We mail it directly to your home. This is our gift to you on our 130th birthday. So for 2 years, $130. You get both the digital and the print editions. Go to afro.com to subscribe. I don't know what else to say. That's no shameless plug. That is an out and out request. And we also want your news. We want your content because content is king. And so you can send your content to editor@afro.com, or you can put a comment in social media. I am off the box. Courtney, it's your turn on the box, and then we'll give the last minute or so to our guests.
Thank you again to everyone for joining in. And thank you, Travis. I feel like I've learned a lot about HBCU Week. And you also mentioned how MPT has the reactions from professors and students as well. And like you said, representation matters. So I'm glad that you guys included like reactions from them, because I feel like, they make up the community. So thank you again for having us on, and or thank you. I'm so sorry. I'm so excited right now, but thank you again for educating us and for everything that you do for the Black community. I just feel like it's essential that we gain this knowledge, and yeah, thank you again.
Well, thank you, Courtney. I'm proud of you. Thank you, Dr. Draper, for allowing me a safe space to be me. And I'll leave you with something, Dr. Draper. It's a news scoop that nobody has known for 30 years. When we said we were going to walk to Annapolis and we made this big announcement and we start marching to Annapolis, remember, I'm from North Carolina. I thought Annapolis was only 13 miles away. Then we got 13 miles and saw a sign that said Annapolis 28 more miles. And that's when I began singing some old Negro spirituals. And it helped us go ahead and get down to Annapolis after it took us 13 hours to get there. But the true story is we didn't know it was going to take us that far. So I can't be, and I would not be sitting in this position, having this conversation with you again. No Shaw University, no Morgan State University, no HBCU experience, no me.
Thank you. What a wonderful way to end the box. At least you kept going. You didn't get to the 13-mile mark and say, oh my goodness, twice as much to go and we're going to turn back.
We start singing, ain't gonna let nobody turn us round, turn us round, turn us round.
And you kept on walking. So that is dedication, and you're still using that same dedication for what you're doing at Maryland Public Television. Like Courtney, we are honored to have had you on the Chicken BOXX on today. To our viewers, thank you so much for tuning in. And Travis, a lot of people will do, and you understand this, they'll come back and watch this later. They'll watch this later. And so Courtney will be monitoring the chat. We still look to see what the comments are. And so as Chippy Bass says, thank you for pushing forward. We do appreciate that. And we appreciate your time. And we look forward. I'm out of the viewing area right now, but I am looking forward to watching it online and catching up with all of the programming that I have missed. All right, thanks everybody for joining us on this week's Chicken BOXX. Take care, and no matter what your issue is, don't be a chicken, get on the box. See you next time.